Buonasera, Marco.
Ciao Dominic.
How are you this beautiful evening? We are no longer in the same town, but we are still in the same country for a
Yes,
couple more days before you're going globetrotting again.
it's always a
Mm,
pleasure to have you here in Italy. No longer in the same town, but still liaising
mm,
and collaborating on this very interesting topic citizenship,
mm.
relocations, visa. So I'm pleased to be here again.
Yep. So it's interesting, not the subject of today's conversation, but I was at the TAR hearing today about the Tajani decree. That's going to be a separate conversation that comes out in a couple of days. There was only a few observers there, so we'll be able to give you an idea of what happened with that. But that is not what we're here to talk about. Several times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, a couple of people asked me about the 2 year path to Italian citizenship for those that have Italian parents or grandparents. And I knew most of the information, but not all of it. So I figured this is a really good topic for us to talk about because you do quite a bit of apply in Italy. And this is absolutely by definition apply in Italy.
Yes, you're
So,
right. Yeah, application in Italy has always been my to say main subject, especially when it comes
mm,
to North Americans clients, because of the difficulties in getting an appointment at the local consulates in North America.
mm,
But in this case, we have to talk about the 2 years, which is somehow connected with the Italian ancestors, but is not fully under the same domain, the wider domain of the Jure Sanguinis citizenship, so the citizenship by descent. There's been a lot of confusion about, in general, the new law, of course, but also the 2 years requirement, because some people they said, oh, it's a backdoor for citizenship, Jure Sanguinis.
mm,
It is a glitch in the new law that has been drafted by the government, which is not a good law, my opinion, of
mm.
course, shared with
And
many
many,
colleagues
and
of mine
many,
as well.
yes. I'm going
not
to
for
say,
the not for the goal itself, but rather for the technique, the legal technique,
mm,
and the to say the wordings, which is sometimes misleading a little bit. So that's also the reason why it is under the scrutiny of the Constitutional Court. And of course, as a consequence, there's been a lot of confusion about also the 2 years requirement, because
mm.
someone, of course, thought legitimately, because I told you, like, it's not very well written, that there is a backdoor to obtain citizenship by descent with the 2 years required, but it's not. At the same time, we cannot ignore that there is something that could be used as an alternative way to get citizenship via this 2 years requirement.
Yeah. And you've given me the perfect segue there. What are the basic eligibility requirements for this new 2 year path that exists?
When it comes to the 2 years requirement listed in the new law, we are looking to the Article 9, 1 of the Law 91 from 1992, which has been amended by the recent Law 74 from 2025. So in this case, this law is not connected to Jure Sanguinis, but rather to naturalization, so citizenship for naturalization. So it's a granting. It's not about recognition, it's about granting citizenship. So when it comes to granting, we do not have to look only to the time requirement, the residency requirement, but also to some other elements, requirements useful to successfully apply for citizenship. But let's start from the 2 years requirement, which is the one that we are
Mm,
referring to in this case for citizenship with Italian ancestors, no matter which kind. It could be grandfather, it could be father. If you happen to reside in Italy for 2 years continuously and legally, you have already one of those requirements met to be granted of the Italian citizenship by naturalization. And which other requirements we can talk about when it comes to this? Criminal background check, which must be, of course, clean, as we say,
mm,
as well as financial requirement, which is important, as well as language requirement. These are the four pillars on which we can pile up our
mm,
citizenship building palace, we can say,
mm.
connected also with the 2 years requirement. but this applies only to those who have Italian ancestry.
Does it impact your chances of getting this or your ability to get this if your ancestors naturalized before the next in line was born? And this is one of the most common things that cuts the path for pure Jure Sanguinis. Not even the minor issue, perhaps, but even the ancestor naturalizing before the next in line was born.
As far as the law has been written, there is no implications on the naturalizations, on the bloodline. It is important to demonstrate that there is an Italian ancestry, there is an Italian origin. So that's important. All the topics regarding the interruption of the bloodline, of the lineage, the ancestry line, is referring to Jure Sanguinis. In this case, we're not talking about Jure Sanguinis anymore. We're talking about citizenship by naturalization. So it has to be granted, not recognized. So also all the implications regarding those kind of topics should not be
Hmm.
considered as far as the new law says. But the new law is just amending an article that was already in place. So, where is the difference compared to the past? That the new law, if on one hand, of course, put some restrictions, important restrictions in the Jure Sanguinis recognition, on the other hand, simplified, made slightly, I would say, easier the obtaining of Italian citizenship by naturalization by reducing the residency time required from 3 years to 2 years. We are always referring to people with Italian ancestry. So all the other categories, they fall under other time
Hmm.
requirements, residency requirements, which could be 4, 5, 10 years, but that's another topic that is more complicated to address. But when it comes to, again, applicants with Italian ancestry, the residency requirement has been reduced from 3 years to 2 years.
Okay. So you have to prove you have at least one Italian ancestor. What sort of documents are needed for that? Is it the standard birth, marriage, death?
Those documents that usually are required to prove ancestry with a classic Jure Sanguinis pathway.
Hmm.
So in that case, vital records can prove the ancestry. Just it's important to stress that in this case, we are not talking about recognition of citizenship by like since birth, but granting of citizenship, which is not retroactive and which can be with discretionality considered, checked, scrutinized by the competent offices. In this case, the competent offices would be the prefetture, so the prefectures that we can find in each province in Italy.
So you need to be in Italy 2 years continuously. What categories of visas can be used to accrue this time? And does a student visa work for this as well? So there's kind of two questions there in one.
As we already addressed with the digital nomad visa live stream, as long as the residency is legal and is continuous, that is definitely a requirement that can be used to reach that threshold of the 2 years. I would say that in this view, it must be also considered a new provision that has been introduced with the new law, which is in favor of the applicants, the citizens, not Italian citizens with Italian ancestry. Because according to the new law, it will be provided a facilitated procedure to get a work visa for those with Italian ancestry. And we're talking about work visa. So this is very important. When it comes to work visa and when it comes to facilitated procedure, it refers pretty clearly to the quote, no, the decreto flussi, which is limiting every year the number of work visa that could be issued by our state. In this case, if you prove your Italian ancestry, you can ask for a work visa to enter Italy outside the quote, so flussi decree. And this is very important. There is only one thing that is still pending and blocking this provision from the new law, which is given by the fact that we are waiting for a interministerial decree to be issued in order to have a list of those countries that will be considered of Italian emigration, that will be considered as countries from where the applicant could legitimately ask for this favorable procedure to obtain a work visa.
So if I'm hearing you, you're going to get all of your documents ready. You're going to present these to some entity, some legal entity, maybe the consulate, maybe somebody else. And that makes you eligible for, is this a new category of work visa, or is this just a different way to obtain
Mm,
visa?
I would say it's a different way to get a work visa because the new law provides this, but it's not specified in which terms. This will be specified by this interministerial decree, which we are waiting for. I'm not confident on an immediate issuing of this decree
Hmm.
because the same interministerial decree was for a long time awaited for the digital nomad visa, which would have set all the
Hmm.
requirements to ask for a digital nomad visa. It took 2 years to be issued because the law on digital nomad visa was issued in late 2022. The decree, interministerial decree, was issued on April 2024, something like that. So it took a year and a half. So I'm not confident that it will be issued soon, but it will be issued. The law states that unless it will be cancelled, erased by the developments at the judiciary level. But that's another fact. As far as we can say from the new text, from the new law text, we can say that there is this provision for a facilitated procedure for those applicants with Italian ancestry, with Italian origin, to get a work visa. And that work visa could be used to pile up those 2 years residency requirement to apply for Italian citizenship for naturalization.
So if somebody doesn't want to wait for this new facilitated visa, could they use an elective residency or digital nomad visa, or must they go through this specific visa route?
No, it is just specified legal residency, continuous and legal residency. So as long as the residency is legal. And what does it mean? To have a permit, regular address in Italy, where you live, where you established your
Hmm.
main residency, that's enough to pile up, as I said again,
Huh.
the requirement, the time needed.
Hmm.
Just one thing that is important when it comes to citizenship by naturalization, very important when this is a general advice. When you change your permit, when you renew your permit, to notice the comune of residency of
Hmm.
that, because you need to tell them that you have kept the same residency. Because if the is not noticed of your renewal of the permit, it risks to be formed a residency hole in which it is difficult then to
Gap.
recover, yeah, to fill that gap. And then when you apply at the prefectura for citizenship and they cannot find your historical certificate
Hmm.
of residency continuous, so with this gap, then it could be a problem, it could be a reason of
Hmm.
rejection. This is a technical aspect but still connected with what we
Right.
are discussing today.
So if I'm hearing you, this actually gives you even more options than you had, that most people have. So you could theoretically do a digital nomad visa and you could work remotely, et cetera, with whomever you're working now. You could get an elective residency visa if you have passive income, you're retired or something like that, where you can live off of savings, or you can get this work permit that would enable you to have regular employment within Italy without any stress or risk with that.
Like, for instance, the financial requirement to have citizenship granted for naturalization is not strictly connected to the source
Mm,
of your finance. So you
mm,
can have, I don't know, revenues.
mm,
You're renting a house, like in your country of origin, and you can reach that threshold, which is pretty low, to be honest, to be
mm,
reached. So as long as you have that money reached in the year of application and the three previous years, you're good to go for
mm,
citizenship granting, no matter which kind of visa you have, elective residency visa,
mm,
digital nomad visa, working visa, are all good to provide the correct instruments to reach
Mhm.
those requirements.
So we have a question from Sarah. We've already addressed this, but we're going to give Sarah a direct answer. So it is, does this apply if my grandfather naturalized in the United States before my mother was born? Could she still apply for this citizenship even though the traditional Jure Sanguinis path is broken because the ancestor naturalized before the birth?
Yes, apparently, yes. There is nothing against this in the law, in the Article 9, as it was amended by the new law from 2025. So it is just referring to the ancestry, like Italian ancestry. But since it is not Jure Sanguinis anymore, we don't have to check the continuity of the bloodline. But of course, like the con is given by the fact that the applicant in this case is not recognized but is granted of citizenship. So it is something that is discretional, and it is something that must be grounded of also the language requirement, the criminal
Mm.
records requirement, the residency requirement, and so on. There are
And
other
also,
implications.
and if you have children, they must be resident with you as well. So it's not the sort of thing that they would get it automatically if you get it. You would have to become a citizen before you have a child for that child to have a Italian citizenship.
We enter in even a more complex scenario because with minors now situation is still very confusing with the provisions because there are two recognition under the Jure Sanguinis provisions that minors could take advantage of. The automatism is not in place anymore except for one case, but there is another provision for minors that could be applied. It is pretty complex. We can address like
Mm.
this topic in a separate live stream. I'll be pleased to do that if you want, of course. But there is that's a separate topic that with minors requires, I believe, a focus, dedicated focus.
So, how long is this actually going to take? You say it's going to take 2 years, but Italy is Italy. So, you're going to have time set up. And then after the 2 years, you're going to have some amount of time to get the paperwork or everything else done. Is this a 3 year process? Is this a 2.5 year process? Or is this anybody's guess because it's brand new right now in its
So
present form?
let's go stick to what the law provides when it comes to
Mm.
naturalization procedures, and the law explicitly says that competent office, in this case the prefettura, has a 2 years limit to process your application and sorting it out, so to give you an outcome, which could be in exceptional case extended to 3 years. So let's say that Dominic wants to take advantage of this process, move to Italy, getting residency in Italy with a visa, 2 years legal residency in Italy, he can apply. From the day of applications, the public administration, namely the prefettura, has 2 years to sort out your application unless it is an exceptional case. In that case, discretional case, it could go up to 3 years. But
Mm.
it's rare, I would say. It's rare case. So I would say 2 years officially, but then it depends on how long it takes for you to get all the documents needed.
Mm. So, you've said a couple times 2 years continuously. Does continuously mean 365 days times two? Are you allowed to return to your country of origin for some amount of time to visit family? Are you allowed to go to France or elsewhere within the European Union for vacation? Or, like yourself, are you allowed to go to the Philippines or Costa Rica or somewhere else for a week or two in there? So, how strict is this 2 years?
This is one of the most common questions when it comes to clients that are moving to Italy, applying in Italy for their citizenship. When it comes to residency, it comes to a concept that is mostly related to the place where you mostly live in. For example, I live in Barletta, Puglia region, Italy. I'm resident in here in this town. And as a resident, of course, I can leave my place for vacation. I can leave my place for a while to go working somewhere else because I have, I don't know, like a workshop or a hearing somewhere else that it takes me a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 1 year. No, 1 year not, of course, but like 1, 2, 3 weeks, a month. I always ask my clients to be reasonable in their choices. Of course, when it comes to a foreigner who's coming here for citizenship, who wants to prove the residency requirement, it is smart to act as proper resident in this place. If they want to go for vacation, they can do that, no problem. They can be absent from here for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, even a month. But as long as they return here, as long as they keep their main place of residency here in Italy, they're good to go. There's no reason to be rejected because of this.
So what sort of accommodation is needed? We know an Airbnb won't work. You need to rent something, you need to buy something. Is this also where a letter of hospitality from family may work? And then the second part of that question is, am I allowed to move during this process? If I want to spend 1 year in one city and 1 year in another city, is that allowed? And even if it's allowed, are there risks to it? Because you might have that hole, like we were talking about, if the two communes perhaps do not communicate well or do not file things at the right time.
Of course, you enter, you said it before, Italy is Italy, so you're entering into a bureaucratic jungle a little bit, and that's why we are here. We lawyers are here also, I would say. No, but fair questions. Let's start from the first one. An apartment, something that can be related to a lease contract, to a regular title deed of residency in the place is good. Possibly, this is what I suggest always to my clients, register. So you have a lease contract, register it to the Agenzia delle Entrate. Sometimes there are some lease contracts that can avoid that, but I always prefer clients to have lease contracts registered because that's a proof somehow. It's given even more formality to the situation. And it could be like a lease contract, a sub rental agreement, a loan contract, whatever it is, possibly registered. That is good to go to collect a regular year of residency in Italy. Second question, can you move around in the country? Yes, you can. But same, remember the same thing that I told you when it comes to renewal of the permit before? Be attentive on the residency move procedures. Be attentive on that, on the regularity of the procedures, because you need then, if you move your residency, let's say that you live for a year in Rome and for the second year in Barletta, if you are residing then in Barletta, you need to apply at the Prefettura in Barletta, proving that you have been also living in Rome. Of course, if you have to do that, I prefer clients to stay in a place in order not to create any possibility of glitches in the application, in the residency history. But you can move around in the country in collecting those 2 years.
It might be safe if you are going to move a little bit of perhaps maybe overlap in those of a couple weeks so you don't have ending one day, starting the other, and just Italy being Italy causing problems.
No, there's no risk of overlapping. I will like explain you in a nutshell how it
Mm,
works when it comes to residency move. You're living in Rome, you have a lease contract, you want to move to Barletta, you don't have to communicate anything to the Comune of Rome. You have to go to Barletta where you have all the documents needed for the residency registration in Barletta. You file your application of residency in Barletta. The Comune of Barletta will tell to the Comune of previous residency,
mm,
in this case Rome, that you have moved to your residency. That's the point. It must be checked. Sometimes could happen that there is no communication and so no cancellation of the residency in Rome, even though you have registered yours in Barletta. So there could be some situations that must be properly checked, also under the fiscal aspects. So no worries in general, but be attentive. That's
mm.
my advice.
Last question on the list for this evening is, once somebody has acquired their citizenship through this route, If they have minor children that have been with them for 2 years, or even, let's say, a minor children that's been with them for 1 year. Yes, Irma, I'm asking your question right now. It just popped up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or the children are born after your citizenship is finalized. So those are three little use cases there for children in various forms.
main rule when it comes to granting citizenship, as long as the child is minor, they get automatically the citizenship of the parent, which is who naturalized in this
Mm.
case. If the child is not minor anymore, they have to do a separate application. That's also a topic that is connected to some tricky situations in which the parent applies when the child is 17 years old, is about to turn 18 years old. So you want to do things in a very expedited way. So you have to push very strongly the competent offices. But that's another story. But the main answer to your question, Irma, is if you are an applicant and if you naturalize Italian and you have minor children, those minor children will get citizenship as well. If they are of age already, they have to do separate application.
So if you're doing this and you have a child that is 17 and they're going to live with you, you're just going to want to do all of these same registration things for them as well. Or even if they're adults at that point, then you're coming up with a different.
You just need to prove that you have minor child in this case or children, depending. And as long as you have minor children and you are naturalized, they are also automatically recognized. This is also the reason why, as I mentioned before, there are situations which you have to push strongly the office to do it
Mm.
quickly in order to have the family unity under the citizenship domain preserved, which is important. It could seem like a detail. That's important because, of course, from citizenship also, how to say, stems out other rights and situations, subjective rights situations.
Right. That's the end of the questions, both from the audience and things we plan to discuss today. Anything you'd like to sign off with, Marco? How can people get a hold of you? And then we'll talk about what we do next after we get off of this call.
Yeah, it could be, as I told you, a good topic to be addressed. The minor children born abroad, which is something, it's an interesting topic under the new law. Because there are two ways mostly that could lead to citizenship. We can address this topic in a different live stream, but this is something that is important, in my opinion, to address because I have always got some questions from clients about this, and is important in this moment to have things focused and clear, waiting, of course, for the Constitutional Court hearing and ruling to be issued soon.
Right. Everybody who joined us today, thank you for coming along. And those looking to get information can either find Marco or myself, or the Jure Sanguinis subreddit is an excellent source of information. This sort of question would be answered there, even though it's technically a little bit outside of the normal Jure Sanguinis. So for everybody that asked questions and
It's
everybody that logged on tonight, sorry, go ahead, Marco.
No, no, I was saying it's like a hybrid case. This one, it's a bit of a Jure Sanguinis, but not properly Jure Sanguinis
Mm.
procedurally. So it's something that could be tricky, of course. I saw some contents that are not very correct, but I understand. On the other side, I understand. There's confusion, and that's why we're here today. But yeah, if anybody is interested in having a consultation or in getting some information about the potential pathway to be followed to relocate, to get citizenship, a visa permit, Dominic will share my contacts, and you can drop me a message either on or via email or WhatsApp.
All right. With that, good night, all, and thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next time.
Thank you, Dominic. Good night to everybody.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.